My name is Daniel Carter, and this story has clung to me like a damp fog since the summer of 2022. I was 24, freshly graduated from Ohio State with a business degree that hadn't opened a single door yet. The economy was tight, jobs were scarce, and my student loans were a constant weight on my shoulders, their interest rates ticking up like a countdown clock. My part-time barista gig at a dingy coffee shop downtown barely covered rent for my cramped apartment, a one-bedroom place with peeling wallpaper and a leaky faucet that dripped incessantly, no matter how many times I tightened it. Desperate for cash, I stumbled across a job posting on a community board at the library. Package delivery for a small logistics outfit based in rural Ohio. The pay was decent, $15 an hour plus mileage, and the hours flexible, promising a chance to clear my head on the open road. I jumped at it, signing up without a second thought, filling out the paperwork with a shaky pen, while balancing a lukewarm latte in my other hand. The gig was simple. Load a beat-up white van with cardboard boxes, navigate the back roads, drop them off, and head back to the depot in Millersburg. The van smelled of stale cigarettes and motor oil, its seats worn thin, but it ran, and that was enough. Most routes were uneventful, a monotonous rhythm that lulled me into a daze. Endless cornfields swayed under the summer sun, their green stalks rustling in the breeze, stretching out like a sea on either side of the road. The occasional farmhouse dotted the landscape, sagging porches adorned with rusted tricycles or faded American flags, the air thick with the scent of manure and freshly cut grass. The constant buzz of cicadas filled the silence, a soundtrack to the solitude, broken only by the occasional bark of a distant dog. But Old Mill Road was different. The first time I mentioned it at a gas station off Route 23, the cashier, a wiry guy with a faded trucker hat and a scar across his cheek, froze mid-pour, the coffee pot trembling slightly in his hand. "Stay off that road after dark," he muttered, his eyes darting to the window as if something might be lurking just beyond the glass. Lights flicker in the trees, and you might hear voices. No one's ever there. His voice was low, almost a growl, and he wouldn't meet my gaze. I smirked, dismissing it as small-town superstition, the kind of tale old men spin to scare newcomers. But a seed of doubt planted itself in my gut, a tiny prickle I couldn't shake as I paid for my gas and drove off, the pump's receipt fluttering in the wind. My first trip down Old Mill Road was a muggy afternoon in late July, the kind where the air feels thick enough to chew, sticking to my skin like a second layer. The road was a narrow ribbon of cracked asphalt, barely wide enough for two vehicles to pass, its edges crumbling into the dirt. Weeds clawed over the blacktop, their green tendrils spilling onto the surface like nature was swallowing it back, reclaiming what man had carved out. The blacktop was pocked with potholes, some deep enough to jolt the van's suspension, and every few yards, I had to swerve to avoid a fallen branch or a patch of gravel that crunched under the tires. About halfway down, the abandoned mill loomed, a decaying relic of weathered wood, its frame sagging like an old man's shoulders after a long day of labor. The windows were shattered, jagged holes staring out like hollow eyes, their glass scattered across the ground in glittering shards. The roof had collapsed on one side, exposing beams blackened by decades of rain and neglect. The wood splintered and warped. Vines snaked up the walls, thick and twisted, their leaves a dull green against the gray facade. And the faint scent of mildew and rot wafted toward me as I slowed the van, the engine's hum mingling with the distant croak of frogs. I had a package for a man named Mr. Hayes, the address scratched on a rusted mailbox leaning against a crooked post. Its red flag bent and peeling, the metal flaking away like rust-colored snow. When I pulled up, he was on his porch, a wiry figure with a gray beard streaked with tobacco stains, his overalls patched and faded, the fabric thin at the knees. A cigarette dangled from his lips, its ember glowing faintly as he squinted at me through the haze, his eyes sunken and shadowed. He took the box, a heavy one labeled Tools. With a grunt, no thanks, no glance, just turned and shuffled inside, the screen door slamming behind him with a metallic clang that echoed in the stillness. As I drove off, I checked my rear-view mirror and my breath caught. A figure stood by the mill, tall and still, draped in a long, dark coat that rippled faintly in the breeze, the fabric moving as if alive. Its silhouette was sharp against the fading light, too still to be human. Its posture rigid like a scarecrow planted in the wrong field. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes with the back of my hand, and it was gone, vanishing as if it had never been there. I chalked it up to heat distortion off the pavement, the mirage effect of a long day under the relentless sun. But the image lingered, gnawing at me like a splinter under a fingernail, an unease I couldn't quite place. A week later, I had to return. It was dusk, the sky bleeding into a deep purple as the last rays of sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields that stretched like skeletal fingers. My final drop-off was a small package for a house near the mill, an isolated place with no porch light, no cars, just a dark silhouette against the trees, its windows like empty sockets staring into the void. The address was scrawled on a torn envelope, 142 Old Mill Road. The ink smudged as if written in a hurry. I knocked on the door, the wood hollow under my fist, the sound reverberating through the silence, and waited. No answer. The air felt heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something sour I couldn't place. Maybe mold, maybe something worse. As I bent to leave the box by the stoop, a lightweight parcel marked personal items, the tape peeling at the edges. A low hum vibrated through the air, steady and mechanical, like the grind of old gears turning. I straightened, scanning the horizon, my eyes narrowing against the dim light. The sound came from the mill. Impossible, since it hadn't operated since the 60s, when the textile industry dried up, leaving the town to wither into a ghost of its former self. The hum grew louder, a deep thrum that seemed to pulse in my chest, vibrating through my ribcage like a second heartbeat. Then I saw it. That figure again. Closer now, maybe 20 yards away, its coat blending into the dusk like ink spilled on paper, the edges fraying into the shadows. My throat tightened, my mouth dry as sandpaper. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cracking in the stillness, echoing off the trees and bouncing back to me like a taunt. It didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood there like a statue carved from shadow. its presence a weight on the air. My heart pounded, a drumbeat in my ears, as I sprinted to the van, fumbling with the keys. My hands slipped between my fingers. I gunned the engine, tires screeching on the gravel, and sped away, the hum fading into the night, replaced by the roar of the engine and my ragged breathing, each exhale a cloud in the cooling air. That night, sleep eluded me like a thief slipping through my fingers. I tossed and turned on my lumpy mattress, the springs creaking under my weight, the ceiling fan above whining as it pushed warm air around my cramped apartment. The image of that figure by the mill looped in my mind, its tall, motionless form, the way its coat rippled in the breeze, the eerie turn of its head as I sped away. My skin prickled with an unease I couldn't shake, a sensation like ants crawling under my flesh. I sat up, the sheets tangled around my legs, and stared at the clock. 2:13 a.m., its red digits glowing in the dark. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the drip of the leaky faucet in the kitchen. Each drop, a tiny hammer against my nerves. I pulled up the delivery logs on my laptop, the screen's blue glow casting shadows across the peeling wallpaper, my fingers trembling slightly as I scrolled. Hayes was the only consistent name on Old Mill Road, a loner who ordered odd supplies, canned soup with dented labels, a hammer with a chipped handle, once a stack of scratched vinyl records, mostly jazz, the kind my dad used to play on Sunday mornings, filling our house with the smooth croon of Louis Armstrong. The randomness of his orders gnawed at me, a puzzle with missing pieces. Who was he really? And why did he live so close to that cursed mill? The next morning, over a lukewarm coffee break, at the depot, I cornered my coworker Tim. He was a stocky guy with a permanent 5 o'clock shadow, always cracking jokes about the boss's bad breath or the van's rattling exhaust. But when I brought up the mill, his face drained of color, his styrofoam cup pausing mid-air, coffee sloshing over the rim. "Man, you don't mess with that place," he said, his voice low, glancing around the break room as if the walls might overhear. Back in the 70s, a worker vanished during a storm, thunder cracking like gunfire, rain pouring like the sky was breaking. They found his coat hanging on a beam, soaked through, the fabric torn at the sleeve, but greenhorns. But his words stuck with me, burrowing into my thoughts like worms in damp soil. The image of that coat hanging alone, swaying in the storm, flashed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was truth buried in Tim's tale. Curiosity won out that evening. The day had been long, my shoulders aching from hauling boxes, my mind buzzing with questions I couldn't answer. I grabbed a flashlight from the junk drawer, its handle scratched, the beam weak but functional, my phone, and a pocket knife I'd kept since a camping trip with my dad years ago, more for comfort than defense, its blade dull but familiar in my hand. I drove back to Old Mill Road, the van's engine coughing as I turned onto the narrow path, the headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. The air grew thick as I neared the mill, a dampness that clung to my skin despite the dry evening, carrying the faint tang of rust, decay, and something metallic like blood left to dry. The hum from the night before was gone, replaced by an oppressive silence, broken only by the groan of the building settling, a sound like bones creaking under pressure. I parked the van a safe distance away, its tires crunching on gravel, and stepped out, the door creaking shut behind me. The mill loomed ahead, its shattered windows like hollow eyes, the collapsed roof a jagged wound against the sky. I hesitated, my breath visible in the cooling air, then forced my legs forward, the gravel shifting under my boots. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of mold and rotting wood, a dampness that seeped into my clothes. My boots crunched on broken glass and splintered wood, the noise echoing in the cavernous space, bouncing off the walls like a heartbeat. The interior was a graveyard of decay. Graffiti scrawled across the walls in faded reds and blacks. Names and dates overlapping. In a chaotic scrawl, crude drawings of eyes watching, some with X's scratched over them as if to blind them. Rusted saws and belts lay scattered, their edges dulled by decades. The floor littered with cigarette butts, beer cans left by thrill seekers, and a single child's shoe, its laces frayed, abandoned in a corner. The beam of my flashlight danced over the chaos, casting long, jagged shadows that seemed to shift as I moved, stretching and twisting like living things. I stepped deeper, my heart thudding in my chest, the pocket knife heavy in my pocket. Then I heard it, a whisper, faint but clear. Daniel. My name carried on the stale air like a breath, soft yet deliberate, brushing against my ear like a lover's touch gone wrong. I froze, my breath hitching in my chest, the knife trembling in my grip. The flashlight flickered, its beam stuttering, and a cold breeze swept through, though the windows were boarded up tight with plywood nailed. Crookedly, gaps letting in slivers of moonlight that danced on the floor. I spun around, my pulse racing, and there it was, the figure, inches away. Its presence a weight on the air, pressing down on my lungs. Its face was a blur, like a smudge on a wet canvas, shifting as if it couldn't hold a form, the edges dissolving into the shadows. But its eyes, black voids, endless and piercing, locked onto mine, pulling at something deep inside me like a hook in my soul, dragging me toward an abyss I couldn't name. I stumbled back, my heel catching on a rusted nail, the flashlight clattering to the floor, its beams spinning wildly across the walls, illuminating a rusted hook dangling from a beam, swaying slightly as if recently touched. The whisper turned into a chorus, overlapping voices all chanting my name, growing louder until it filled my skull. A cacophony that drowned out my thoughts, each syllable a nail driven into my mind, sharp and relentless. I clamped my hands over my ears, the knife slipping from my fingers, clanging against the floor, but the sound only grew. A tidal wave of Daniel, 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 echoing in the hollow space. Panic surged through me, a primal instinct kicking in, my body moving before my mind could catch up. I scrambled to my feet, tripping over debris, nails biting into my palms, drawing beads of blood that glistened in the flashlight's beam, wood shards snapping underfoot. The child's shoe rolling away into the dark. I bolted for the door, my hands shaking as I yanked it open. The night air hitting me like a slap, carrying the scent of moss, rot, and that metallic tang again, stronger now. I reached the van, fumbling with the keys, my fingers slipping on the metal, the cold biting into my skin. The engine sputtered, a cough of exhaust clouding the air. before roaring to life, the vibration shaking my bones. As I floored the gas, tires screeching on the gravel, I glanced. The figure stood in the doorway, its head tilted slightly, those black eyes fixed on me, unblinking, a silhouette against the dim interior, the moonlight catching the edge of its coat. I didn't stop until I hit the main road, my hands white-knuckled on the wheel, my breath coming in short gasps. That night, I couldn't sleep, the whisper echoing in my ears. The image of those eyes burned into my retinas. I knew then that Old Mill Road wasn't just a road, it was a threshold. And I'd crossed it. That night, after fleeing the mill, I couldn't sleep. The whisper of my name echoed in my ears, a phantom sound that lingered long after I'd locked the van doors and sped back to my apartment. My hands trembled as I showered, the hot water doing little to wash away the chill that had settled into my bones, the scent of mold and rust still clinging to my clothes. I sat on the edge of my bed, the lumpy mattress sagging under me, staring at the cracked ceiling, the drip of the leaky faucet in the kitchen, a relentless metronome. The image of that figure, its blurred face, those black voids for eyes, burned into my retinas, a nightmare I couldn't blink away. The next morning, I called my boss, a burly man with a crew cut named Frank, and quit. Personal reasons, I mumbled, my voice hoarse, avoiding his gruff, "You sure?" with a curt nod. He didn't press, just grunted and mailed me my last check, the envelope arriving 2 days later with a coffee stain on the corner. I couldn't face Old Mill Road again, couldn't risk another encounter with that thing. For a week, I tried to move on. I stayed indoors, the blinds drawn tight, the apartment a cocoon of dim light and stale air. I applied for jobs online, retail, call centers, anything to keep my mind off that night. But my focus was shot, my hands shaking as I typed. My roommate Jake, a lanky guy with a perpetual smirk and a love for late-night gaming, noticed. "You look like hell, man," he said one evening, pausing his headset mid-shout, his screen flashing with pixelated explosions. "What's eating you?" I shrugged, muttering something about stress, but his raised eyebrow told me he didn't buy it. I couldn't tell him. How do you explain a figure with no face, a voice that knows your name? The thought made my stomach twist, a knot of fear I couldn't untie. Then the dream started. The first night, I woke at 2:17 a.m., my heart pounding, sweat soaking through my t-shirt. I'd seen it, the figure, standing at the foot of my bed, its long coat pooling on the floor like spilled oil, like its head tilted slightly. Those black eyes staring into mine. It didn't move, didn't speak, just watched, a presence that filled the room with a cold dread. I jolted upright, the sheets twisted around my legs, and fumbled for the light switch, the bulb flickering before casting a weak glow. Nothing was there, just the familiar clutter of my room. Dirty laundry, a stack of unread books, the poster of a band I'd outgrown peeling at the edges. But the feeling lingered, a weight on my chest, a whisper in the back of my mind. The next night, it was worse. I dreamed of the mill, its interior alive with shadows that writhed like snakes, the hum vibrating through the walls. The figure stood in the center, its coat flapping though there was no wind, and it turned to me, its voice a chorus of Daniel, overlapping until it was a scream. I woke gasping, my throat raw, the clock reading 3:04 a.m., the exact time I'd glanced at it after leaving the mill. A month later, the real trouble began. My phone buzzed on the nightstand at 2:13 a.m., the screen glowing with an unknown number. I answered, expecting a wrong number or a drunk dial, but there was only static. Then that hum, the same low drone from the mill, vibrating through the speaker like a heartbeat, deep and resonant. It lasted 10 seconds before cutting off, leaving a ringing in my ears that faded into silence. It happened again the next night, and the night after, always at odd hours, 3:04 a.m., 1:49 a.m. The times etched into my memory like scars. I changed my number, a tedious process at the phone store with a bored clerk who barely looked up. But the calls persisted, the hum seeping through the new line like it knew where to find me. I blocked the numbers, unplugged the phone at night, but the dreams grew more vivid. One night, I saw the figure in my kitchen, its coat brushing against the counter, leaving a trail of dampness. On the linoleum, I woke to find a puddle where it had stood, the air cold and heavy, though the windows were closed tight. Desperation set in. I couldn't tell Jake. He'd think I'd lost it, and I wasn't sure he was wrong. Instead, I started researching online, my laptop screen glowing late into the night, the fan whirring as I scrolled through forums and local history sites. I found mentions of the mill, built in 1923, shut down in 1965 after a series of accidents. The last one involving a worker named Thomas Grady, who vanished during a storm. The article was brief. Yellowed text scanned from a microfilm archive. Grady, 38, last seen entering the mill during a thunderstorm. Coat found hanging on a beam. No trace of the man. A comment thread on a paranormal blog speculated about a curse, linking it to a fire in 1947 that killed 3 workers. Their screams, allegedly heard for weeks after. I shivered, the room feeling smaller, the walls closing in. Was that figure Grady? Or something older? Something that fed on the mill's decay? One morning, I found my keys missing from the nightstand. A small brass keychain I'd had since high school. A gift from my grandpa with a tiny eagle etched on it, its wings worn smooth by years of handling. I tore the apartment apart, lifting couch cushions, checking drawers, my hands shaking as I muttered curses under my breath. They turned up in the kitchen sink, soaked and cold, the metal slick with water. Though I'd left them dry on the table, the wood still warm from the evening light filtering through the blinds. I stared at them, my reflection distorted in the wet brass, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Jake walked in, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and froze. "Dude, what's with the sink?" he asked, his voice thick with confusion. "I dropped them," I lied, shoving them into my pocket, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue, and shuffled back to his room, but I knew he'd noticed the panic in my eyes. The nights grew worse. The hum infiltrated my dreams, a constant undertone to the figure's presence. One night, I woke to find the apartment door ajar, though I'd locked it before bed, the chain dangling loose. I checked the locks, my hands trembling, and found no sign of forced entry, just that cold, damp scent from the mill lingering in the air. Another time, I found a rusted nail on my pillow, its head bent, its surface pitted with age, lying where my head had been. I threw it out, but the next night, another appeared, then a third, each one a silent threat I couldn't ignore. I started sleeping with the lights on, the bulbs hum, a poor substitute for peace. But the figure still came, its eyes boring into me, its whisper a constant refrain. I was losing my grip, my reflection in the mirror showing a man I barely recognized. Pale, shadow of the college grad who'd taken that delivery job with hope in his heart. Whatever I'd encountered at Old Mill Road wasn't done with me, and I was starting to wonder if I'd ever escape its reach. By mid-August 2022, I was a wreck. The nights blurred into a cycle of sleeplessness and dread, the hum from those phantom calls seeping into my days, a constant undertone that made my skin crawl. My apartment had become a prison, the blinds drawn tight against the sunlight, the air stale with the scent of unwashed dishes and my own fear. Jake had stopped asking about my mood, his gaming sessions growing louder, as if to drown out the tension. But I could feel his sideways glances, his unspoken questions hanging heavy. I knew I couldn't keep ignoring it. The figure, the whispers, the nails on my pillow. Whatever I'd encountered at Old Mill Road wasn't just a memory. It was a presence that had followed me home, and I needed to understand why. The uncertainty was eating me alive, a gnawing hunger for answers I couldn't suppress. I started with the internet, my laptop screen glowing late into the night, the fan whirring as I scrolled through forums and local history sites. The glow cast shadows across my room, stretching the edges of my furniture into distorted shapes that made my heart skip. I found mentions of the mill, built in 1923 by the Grady family, a textile hub that thrived until 1965, when a series of accidents forced its closure. The last incident involved Thomas Grady, a 38-year-old worker and distant cousin to the original owners, who vanished during a thunderstorm on October 12, 1972. The article pulled from a yellowed microfilm archive on the Millersburg Historical Society's site was brief but chilling. Grady last seen entering the mill as lightning split the sky. Coat found hanging on a beam, soaked and torn. No trace of the man, despite an exhaustive search. A grainy black and white photo showed a stern-faced man with a mustache, his eyes dark under a cap, standing beside a loom. Was that the figure I'd seen? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. A comment thread on a paranormal blog speculated about a curse, linking it to a fire in 1947 that killed 3 workers, 2 men and a woman. Their screams allegedly heard for weeks after, echoing through the trees. Another user claimed the mill sat on unholy ground, a burial site disturbed by its construction. But there was no evidence to back it up, just rumors and half-remembered tales. Desperate for more, I drove to the Millersburg Library the next day, the van's engine rattling as I navigated the back roads, my hands tight on the wheel. The library was a squat brick building, with a faded sign, its interior smelling of old paper and dust. The librarian, a wiry woman with gray hair pulled into a bun, eyed me suspiciously as I asked about the mill. "You're not the first to ask," she said, her voice dry as parchment. She led me to a back room, pulling out a box of archived newspapers and a ledger from the Grady family. The papers detailed the 1947 fire, smoke billowing from the mill, firefighters battling flames as townsfolk watched in silence. The 3 workers' names etched in a memorial plaque: Henry Walsh, Margaret Dunn, and Robert Grady. The ledger, handwritten in faded ink, chronicled the mill's decline. Production drops, worker complaints of strange noises, and a note from 1965. Thomas insists the place is haunted, refuses to work nights. I photocopied what I could, my fingers smudging the ink, and thanked her, her nod curt as I left. Back home, I pored over the documents, the hum from my dreams pulsing in my ears. A letter from Thomas Grady to his sister, dated 1971, caught my eye. Something's wrong here. The walls move at night, and I hear my name in the wind. I think it's watching me. The words mirrored my experience, a chill settling into my chest. I contacted a local historian, Dr. Ellen Pierce, via email, attaching the letter and asking for her insight. Her reply came 2 days later. The mill's history is murky, but there's talk of a ritual gone wrong in the 40s, possibly tied to the fire. Thomas's disappearance might be linked. Some say he was trying to banish it. She suggested I visit the site, but the thought made my stomach lurch. Instead, I dug deeper, finding a forum post from a user named ShadowSeeker77, who claimed to have explored the mill in 2019. Found a hidden room, they wrote, with symbols carved into the walls, circles and eyes, left fast after hearing footsteps. I printed the post, my printer jamming halfway, the paper creased and smudged. A next step was bolder. I called a paranormal investigator, Mark Hensley, whose ad I'd seen on a flyer at the library. His voice was gravelly over the phone, tinged with skepticism. "I've heard of Old Mill Road," he said. "Met a guy once who swore he saw a figure there, said it vanished when he blinked. Meet me tomorrow, 6 p.m., at the edge of town." I agreed, my pulse quickening, and spent the day preparing. A recorder, a camera, the photocopies, my hands shaking as I packed. That night, the dream was different. The figure stood in a room I hadn't seen, its coat brushing against stone walls carved with symbols, a low chant filling the air. I woke at 3:04 a.m., the clock's red digits mocking me, and found a scratch on my forearm, red and raw, though I'd been alone. The meeting with Mark was tense. He was a stocky man with a beard and a worn leather jacket. His van cluttered with equipment, EMF meters, thermal cameras, a bag of salt. "If it's a spirit, we might agitate it," he warned as we drove toward the mill site, the bulldozed lot now a scar on the landscape. We parked, the air thick with dust, and he set up his gear, the meters beeping sporadically. I told him about the whispers, the hum, the nails, my voice cracking as I relived it. He nodded, scanning the area. "Residual energy, maybe," he muttered. "Or something intelligent." As dusk fell, the meters spiked, a high-pitched whine cutting through the silence. I felt it, a cold draft, the scent of rot, and turned to see nothing but shadows. Mark's camera flashed, capturing a blur near the rubble. "Got something," he said, but the image was indistinct, a smudge of darkness. Then I heard it, faint but clear. "Daniel." The whisper from the mill, now here. Mark paled, packing up fast. "We're done," he said, his voice tight. "This isn't safe." Back home, I reviewed the footage. The blur taunting me, the whisper looping on the recorder. The symbols from ShadowSeeker77's post matched those in my dream, a realization that hit like a punch. I was closer to the truth, but it felt like opening a door I couldn't close. The next morning, I found a rusted nail on my doorstep. Its head bent, a silent message. The figure wasn't just a memory. It was active, and I was its target. I didn't know how to fight it, but I knew I had to try. By late September 2022, I was a man unraveling. The nails kept appearing on my doorstep, in my mailbox, once balanced precariously on the edge of my coffee mug. Each one a rusted reminder of the figure that haunted me. The hum from those phantom calls had become a constant companion, a low drone that vibrated through my skull, even during the day, making my hands shake as I poured cereal or typed job applications. Dr. Pierce's email and Mark Hensley's blurry photo offered clues, but no solutions, and the symbols from my dream, circles and eyes carved into stone, plagued my thoughts. I couldn't live like this, jumping at shadows, sleeping with the lights on, the bulb's faint buzz a poor shield against the nightmares. I had to go back, not to confront it, not yet, but to find something, anything, that might explain why it knew my name, why it wouldn't let me go. I planned it for a Saturday, October 8th, 2022. A crisp evening with a waxing moon casting a pale light. I told Jake I was visiting a friend. My lie clumsy, but accepted with a distracted nod as he plugged into his headset. I packed the van with essentials: the flashlight, the recorder, the photocopies, a bag of salt Mark had insisted I take, just in case, and the pocket knife. Its blade still dull, but a comfort in my trembling hand. The drive to Old Mill Road was tense, my knuckles white on the wheel, the radio off to avoid masking any sounds. The bulldozed lot where the mill once stood loomed ahead, a scar of churned earth and scattered debris. The air thick with dust and the faint tang of gasoline from the construction equipment. I parked, the van's engine ticking as it cooled, and stepped out, the gravel crunching under my boots, the night silent except for the rustle of leaves in the breeze. I approached the site, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, illuminating chunks of concrete and twisted metal. The symbols from my dream seemed to flicker in my mind, urging me forward. I found a patch of ground where the foundation had been exposed, the earth uneven, and knelt, my fingers brushing the dirt. Something glinted, a shard of glass, then a rusted nail, and finally, a small metal box half buried, its lid warped but intact. I pried it open with the knife, my breath shallow, and found a bundle of papers, yellowed and brittle, tied with a frayed string. Inside was a journal, its pages filled with cramped handwriting. Thomas Grady's, I realized, the ink faded but legible. The entries detailed his growing terror. The walls pulse at night. The air grows cold. It calls my name, and I see it in the shadows. The last entry, dated October 11th, 1972, read, "I've seen the ritual room. The symbols protect it, but I can't stop it. It wants a vessel. Tonight, I end this." My heart sank. A vessel? Was that me? As I read, the hum returned, louder now, vibrating through the ground, shaking the box in my hands. I stood, the journal clutched to my chest, and turned. There it was, the figure, emerging from the rubble, its coat flapping though the air was still. Its face was a blur, shifting like smoke, but those black voids for eyes locked onto mine, pulling me toward an abyss. Daniel. The chorus of whispers began, overlapping, a tidal wave of sound that drowned out my thoughts. I stumbled back, dropping the journal, the pages scattering in the wind, and fumbled for the salt. spilling it in a shaky line between us. The figure paused, its head tilting, a gesture that felt mocking. The hum grew to a roar, the ground trembling, and I saw flashes, images in my mind, not my own. A fire, screams, Thomas Grady's coat swaying on a beam, and a circle of stones with those symbols carved deep. Panic seized me. I grabbed the recorder, shouting, "Leave me alone," into the mic, my voice breaking. The figure advanced, the salt line cracking under an unseen force, and I ran, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly, my boots slipping on the loose earth. I reached the van, slamming the door, the engine roaring to life as I floored the gas, tires spinning before catching. In the mirror, I saw it, standing where I'd been, its eyes glinting, the scattered journal pages swirling around it like leaves in a storm. I didn't stop until I hit Millersburg, my hands shaking, the hum fading but not gone. The aftermath was a blur. I locked the journal in a drawer, its pages a weight on my conscience, and tried to resume life. But the dreams persisted. The figure now holding the journal, its whispers clearer, "You're mine." One night, I woke to find the drawer open, the journal on my bed, a new entry in fresh ink. Daniel, the vessel is chosen. The mill lives. My blood ran cold. I moved out a week later, a new apartment in New Columbus, but the hum followed, faint but growing, the nails appearing again, on the windowsill, in my shoes. Last week, June 25th, 2025, I drove past the development site on a work errand. The houses were half-built, skeletons of wood and plaster. And in the rearview mirror, for a split second, I saw it, the figure, standing among the frames, its coat blending with the shadows. I haven't slept since. Sometimes, late at night, I hear my name, a whisper from the walls. And I wonder if Thomas failed, if I'm the vessel it sought all along. The mill may be gone, but its presence isn't, and I fear it never will be.